This video is brought to you by Straightgoods News, Canada's alternative online news source. Visit Straightgoods.ca.
EI is not paid for by taxes. It is paid for by workers and employers. When workers' claims are processed or when they collect employment insurance, it is their own premiums that pay for it. In 2008, despite assurances from the Conservative government that the economy was fine, we entered a recession and unemployment spiked as more than 400,000 Canadians lost their jobs. That caused the number of EI claims to jump, and the government hired thousands of new temporary employees to process EI applications. In 2011, many of these temporary employees were laid off, and retiring permanent employees were not replaced. As a result, there were fewer employees by October 2011 than there were in October 2007, before the recession even started. However, there were not fewer EI applications. In October 2011, there were 360,481 people waiting for their EI claims to be processed, compared to 181,931 people in October 2007. 1 in 4 applicants did not receive a check or any notice within 28 days. Nearly half of all applications are experiencing delays in processing. More than 22,000 people have been forced to wait 128 days or more for their EI, while their claims were churned through the automated system and then were finally dealt with by a human being. Rent, mortgages, utilities, and groceries. These are all things that need to be paid weekly or monthly. Unemployed workers can't wait 2 months to pay the bills. As a result of EI delays, the number of applicants in dire straits with no way to pay for basic necessities like food and rent is increasing. Canadians frustrated over long waits for benefits can't even get an answer about their claims when they call Service Canada. 1 in 5 calls are abandoned because a caller can't reach a person in a timely fashion. Service Canada employees warned that the loss of jobs would hurt the EI processing capacity of Service Canada at a time when the economy is not yet on a strong path to recovery. Since the fall, the NDP has repeatedly raised the issue of Service Canada cuts and how they were affecting vulnerable Canadians. But the minister continued to insist that modernization was saving Canadians money and was ensuring better services for Canadians. Every year, Service Canada employees normally work overtime in December to ensure that unemployed workers receive their benefits in time for Christmas. This year, overtime was prohibited in December despite demands from the NDP. In January, finally, the minister brought in extra staff to help Service Canada process EI claims. Her response, however, is far too little, too late. The NDP have decided to go on a tour from coast to coast. We are going to go to some of those areas that are losing an EI processing centre to automation. We want to hear from the people most affected by these cuts. We're already hearing from Canadians that the first priority of this minister should be to make EI work for all Canadians. That means keeping enough staff on hand to deal with the surges in demand. And it means putting the needs of unemployed workers ahead of a modernization agenda that can't deal with 50% of the claims. We also want to hear from Canadians how these delays cost their local economies and how that adds up in the national picture. Canada lost jobs again in January, so even more Canadians will be applying for EI in weeks to come.
A couple months ago when you first talked about the backlogs at the call centres, but it's more pertinent now, perhaps the budget coming up. There was a poll today that said that many Canadians would prefer that the government make cuts to as opposed to raising taxes in the next budget. Cuts, of course, are going to mean loss of staff. This is a problem that's related to loss of staff. Do you think the Canadians, yes, okay, services are being affected by some, but don't you think most Canadians are going to say, well, who cares? We really would rather have the budget brought in line and not raise taxes at the same time. Yeah, it might be a pinch here and there to some people on EI recipients, but for the most part, we'd just rather the government proceed on course.
I think there's a couple of things. I think you have to look at the context of what that whole survey said, and I don't have all the questions. If you ask Canadians specifically, do you want cuts to the people who actually provide you with your employment insurance checks and your Canada pension checks and your old age security checks, I would actually suggest Canadians would say, I would prefer you cut somewhere else. The money coming into our communities supports our local businesses, and it's not isolated. I live in a very high unemployment area, and I can tell you this employment insurance checks are very important to our local economies. So I think we have to be careful with just saying, oh, cuts across the board.
And secondly, what do you actually hope to achieve from this tour? I mean, I think I can't imagine that there's an MP in Parliament who has not heard from EI recipients in their constituencies about the troubles that are being faced. Don't you guys already know all the things you're going to find out on this tour?
Well, I think there's a couple of things. Part of it is to actually encourage Canadians to contact their Conservative members of Parliament who have some power within their own caucus to put pressure on their own government to change the course that they're taking. I think the other thing is that Canadians are very resourceful, and part of what we're also hoping to hear is some ideas from Canadians about how services at Service Canada can be improved. So certainly we're all hearing from them, but I suspect that we're going to hear something different. I did a different forum on another matter on Saturday and heard some new information that I actually hadn't heard before. So I'm expecting that we'll hear some new information.
No, it'd be unfair to accuse the minister of not reacting. I mean, it may have come late, but in January she did in fact authorize the rehiring of some of the people who've been laid off, the temporary rehiring of some of the people who've been laid off. She did authorize overtime, whereas it had not been done before. Has she not reacted, properly in this regard?
She responded far too late. The claims always spike in the wintertime. I know from previous years that overtime is normally authorized in November to deal with the influx of claims that comes in December and January, so they're not going into this period of time. The other thing about renewing or rehiring some of the employees is that they're on a month-to-month contract. And I would suggest that given the backlogs that they've got, that they actually need to have a slightly longer term strategy around their human resources in the department, 2, 3, 4 months out. They've got some serious problems. And one of the numbers that we didn't use is that people who have made a mistake and have declared that to the department, or who are being investigated for other reasons, over 400 days delays in those things. And, that's a pretty serious, they've got extreme backlogs in a number of areas that this temporary hiring isn't going to deal with.
Are you fearing at all, though, that these kind of things, I mean, okay, we're talking now about EI, but surely there's reasons for all, for employees in other departments. I mean, as we're looking to make perhaps widespread layoffs in federal departments, don't you think that this is going to kind of filter through to other departments as well?
Okay, so let's back up a little bit. Employment insurance is not paid out of general tax revenue. It is paid out of the premiums that employers and employees contribute. The fund is administered out of those premiums that people pay. So arguably, if you're paying into an insurance scheme, which is what this is, you should hire a reasonable number of people to process your claim in a timely way. This is not general tax revenue. This is employer and worker money. So hire the people to process them so they get what they paid into. Other departments are different.